His ex-wife holds the power to destroy him. What she does next will shock you. The elevator doors slid open, revealing Nathan Miller's worst nightmare and only salvation standing in his boardroom. Miriam Davis straightened her shoulders, briefcase in hand, as Miller Industries creditors waited for her recommendation. Bankruptcy or restructuring, death or life. His empire's fate rested in the hands of the woman whose heart he'd shattered 5 years ago. She smiled coldly. "Hello, Nathan. Ready to lose everything?" The silence in the Miller Industries boardroom stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. 43 floors above downtown Seattle, the fate of a $2.8 billion empire hung in the balance, and Nathan Miller found himself staring into the dark eyes of the woman who once promised to love him forever. Miriam Davis had changed. The soft curves he remembered had sharpened into elegant angles. Her hair, once loose around her shoulders during lazy Sunday mornings, was now pulled back in a severe bun that screamed competence. The gentlewoman who used to bring him coffee at midnight during his startup days had been replaced by this polished attorney whose very presence commanded respect. But her eyes, God, those eyes still held depths he could drown in. "Mr. Miller," Miriam said, her voice carrying not a trace of the warmth he remembered. "I'm Attorney Davis, representing the creditor consortium. I believe we have quite a bit to discuss about your company's financial situation." Margaret Steinberg, the lead bank representative, leaned forward with predatory interest. "Attorney Davis comes highly recommended for these types of corporate restructurings. Her success rate in maximizing creditor recovery is quite impressive." Nathan's throat felt like sandpaper. Miriam's success rate in dismantling companies exactly like his. The irony wasn't lost on him that the woman who once helped him draft his first business plan was now here to potentially tear it all down. "Of course," Nathan managed, his voice rougher than intended. "Please, take a seat." As Miriam settled into the chair directly across from him, Nathan caught a hint of her perfume. The same vanilla and jasmine blend she'd worn throughout their marriage. The scent hit him like a physical blow, transporting him back to mornings when she'd kiss him goodbye before he lost himself in endless meetings and conference calls. Richard Donovan, Nathan's business partner for the past 15 years, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should begin with the preliminary assessment." Miriam opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, but Nathan noticed the slight tremor in her hands. So she wasn't as composed as she appeared. The thought both comforted and terrified him. Miller Industries currently faces approximately $2.8 billion in outstanding debt obligations, Miriam began, her tone professionally neutral. The green energy market collapse has left your company significantly over-leveraged with insufficient liquid assets to meet upcoming payment schedules. Each word was a knife, not because of the financial implications Nathan already knew by heart, but because of how easily she delivered them. This was his life's work she was discussing with the same detachment she might use to describe the weather. "However," she continued, finally meeting his eyes, "preliminary review suggests there may be viable restructuring options, depending on management's willingness to make significant operational changes." Their gazes locked across the polished conference table. 5 years of history passed between them in that moment, the late nights building this company together, the dreams they'd shared about changing the world through sustainable technology, the promises they'd made and broken, the love they'd lost. Nathan's hands clenched involuntarily. What kind of operational changes? A ghost of something crossed Miriam's face before she regained her composure. That would depend on a thorough review of your personal financial commitments, executive compensation structures, and willingness to divest non-essential assets. Non-essential, Nathan repeated quietly. Everything he'd built was essential. Every acquisition, every expansion, every risk had been calculated to create this empire. Margaret Steinberg interrupted the charged atmosphere. Attorney Davis, what's your preliminary timeline for completing the assessment? 72 hours should be sufficient for initial recommendations, Miriam replied, still watching Nathan. Though I'll need complete access to financial records, including personal holdings that might be leveraged for company obligations. The request hit Nathan like a cold shower. His personal records would reveal not just his business vulnerabilities, but the charitable work he'd never publicized, the guilt-driven philanthropy that started after their divorce, the families affected by corporate bankruptcies that he'd quietly helped, the part of himself he had hidden from everyone, including Miriam. Of course, he said. Whatever you need. Something flickered in Miriam's expression. Surprise, perhaps. She'd expected him to fight the invasion of privacy. As the other creditors filed out with promises to reconvene in 72 hours, Nathan found himself alone with Miriam for the first time in 5 years. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. I never expected it to be you, Nathan said quietly. Miriam's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of the woman he'd married. Nathan, how have you been? The question escaped before he could stop it. She stiffened, rebuilding her walls. This is business, Nathan. Nothing more. But even as she said it, Nathan noticed she still wore the small gold bracelet he'd given her for their first anniversary, the one inscribed with "always" in his handwriting. You became a bankruptcy attorney, he observed, the irony sharp in his voice. I became good at what I do, she replied coolly. Some might say I learned from the best about how companies fail their stakeholders. The barb hit its mark. Nathan absorbed the blow, knowing he deserved it. Miriam, about what happened between us. Don't. Her voice cut through his attempted apology. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. We're not those people anymore. But even as she spoke, Nathan saw her eyes drift to the pen in his hand. The same Mont Blanc she'd given him for his 30th birthday. The one he'd used to sign every major contract since. The one he still unconsciously tapped against surfaces when stressed, just like now. You still do that, she murmured before catching herself. Old habits, Nathan said, setting the pen down. Some things don't change. Everything changes, Miriam replied, but her voice had softened fractionally. That's why we're here. She stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that still shook slightly. I'll need your private office to conduct the review. Somewhere without interruptions, Nathan's pulse quickened at the thought of having her so close for 3 days, in the same space where they had once planned their future together, where she'd kissed him goodbye on their last anniversary before everything fell apart. Take mine, he offered. Top floor. It has everything you'll need. As Miriam gathered her materials, Nathan caught her wrist gently. The touch sent electricity through both of them, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. Miriam, She pulled away as if burned. This is business, Nathan. Nothing more. But the way she said his name, with that familiar softness beneath the steel, told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't as unaffected as she pretended. The woman he'd loved was still there, buried beneath 5 years of hurt and professional armor. Have you ever faced someone from your past who could change your entire future? Tell me your story in the comments, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if this reunion already has your pulse racing. After she left, Nathan remained in the empty boardroom, staring at the spot where she'd sat. Margaret Steinberg's words echoed in his mind. Miriam's success rate in maximizing creditor recovery. She wasn't here to save him. She was here to dissect his empire with surgical precision. But the bracelet. She still wore his bracelet. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Are you sure about this? Maybe we should request a different attorney. Nathan stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Number. If his empire was going to fall, if everything he'd built was going to be judged and found wanting, then it would be by the only person whose opinion had ever truly mattered to him, even if she hated him, especially because she hated him. 3 hours later, Nathan found himself outside his own office door, holding a cup of coffee, the same vanilla latte Miriam used to love during their late-night planning sessions. His hand hesitated on the door handle. Inside, the woman who'd once been his everything was systematically examining the ruins of the life he'd chosen over her. He knocked softly. "Come in." Miriam looked up from a stack of financial documents, her reading glasses perched on her nose. For a moment, she looked exactly like she had during those early days when they'd worked side by side, building something beautiful together. "I thought you might need this," Nathan said, setting the coffee beside her. She stared at the cup and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. "You remembered." "I remember everything, Miriam." Their eyes met and the professional distance she'd maintained crumbled slightly. "Nathan, this is already complicated enough." "I know." He moved closer, drawn by forces he couldn't control. "But I had to try." "Try what?" "To show you I'm not the same man who let you walk away." Miriam stood abruptly, creating distance between them. "Don't do this. Don't make this about us. 43 families depend on the jobs in this company. Your employees trust you to make smart decisions. This can't be about old feelings." "What if it has to be?" Nathan stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "What if you're the only person who can save everything I built, because you're the only one who truly understood why I built it?" "I understood why you built it," Miriam said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What I never understood was why you chose it over us." The words hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Nathan's hand rose instinctively toward her face, drawn by memory and longing. For a heartbeat, Miriam didn't pull away. Her lips parted slightly, and Nathan saw the same confusion and desire in her eyes that he felt in his bones. Then, the moment shattered, as Richard Donovan's voice echoed from the outer office. "Nathan, are you in there?" Miriam stepped back, rebuilding her walls with visible effort. "You should go." "I have work to do." Nathan nodded, though every instinct screamed at him to stay. "Miriam?" She didn't look up from her papers. "What? For what it's worth, losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." Only then did she meet his eyes, and what he saw there made his chest tighten with hope and terror in equal measure. Pain, yes. Anger, absolutely. But underneath it all, something that looked dangerously like the love they'd once shared. "Some mistakes," Miriam said quietly, "can't be undone." As Nathan left his office, he heard Miriam's soft sob through the door. The sound cut through him like glass, reminding him of all the nights he'd heard her cry herself to sleep during those final months of their marriage. The nights he'd been too buried in work to comfort her. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Whatever it took, however long the next 72 hours lasted, Nathan would prove to Miriam that the man she'd married was still there. Changed, hopefully. Wiser, certainly. But still desperately, completely in love with her, even if it cost him everything. Chapter 2. The midnight hour found Miriam surrounded by financial documents that painted a picture of brilliant ambition and spectacular overreach. Nathan's empire, built from a tech startup in his garage to a green energy conglomerate, revealed itself through numbers that spoke of both genius and fatal miscalculation. She removed her reading glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. The vanilla latte sat cooling beside her, untouched but somehow comforting. Just like Nathan to remember such details, the same attention to small things that had made her fall in love with him, and the same focus that eventually shifted away from her to spreadsheets and board meetings. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "It's past midnight," Nathan's voice carried through the door. "You should rest." "I'm fine," she called back, though exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. "Miriam, His voice held that gentle persistence she remembered. "Please, open the door." Against her better judgment, she unlocked it. Nathan stood in the hallway holding a plate of food from the executive kitchen. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked. The question was so familiar, so reminiscent of their married life that her throat tightened. "I don't remember." "Then you definitely need this." He entered without invitation, setting the plate on the coffee table. "Grilled salmon with that lemon herb seasoning you used to love." Miriam stared at the perfectly prepared meal. "You don't cook." "I learned." Nathan's smile was sad and hopeful. "Turns out I had a lot of time to pick up new skills after you left." She wanted to resist, to maintain professional boundaries, but the salmon smelled incredible, and her stomach betrayed her with a loud rumble. Nathan chuckled, and the sound transported her back to lazy Sunday mornings when they'd cooked together in their first apartment. "Eat," he said gently. "We can discuss the restructuring options while you do." As Miriam took her first bite, Nathan settled into the chair across from her. Not behind his imposing desk where he could hide behind authority, but close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair and the new lines around his eyes. "The green energy expansion was aggressive," she said, focusing on business to avoid the intimacy of the moment. "Aggressive," Nathan agreed. "Maybe reckless." "The market projections looked solid when we made the investments." "Projections aren't guarantees." Miriam set down her fork. "You leveraged everything on potential rather than proven performance. That's not the Nathan Miller I used to know." Something flickered across his face. "The Nathan Miller you knew was afraid to take big risks. After you left, I stopped being afraid of losing things." "Because you'd already lost what mattered most?" The words slipped out before Miriam could stop them, revealing more vulnerability than she intended. Nathan's eyes softened with something that looked dangerously like hope. "Yes," he said simply. "What's the point of playing it safe when you've already destroyed the most precious thing in your life?" Miriam stood abruptly, needing distance from the raw honesty in his voice. "Nathan, we can't do this. We can't pretend the past 5 years didn't happen." "I'm not pretending anything." He rose too, following her to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "I know exactly what I lost. I think about it every single day. Stop." Her reflection in the glass showed her own pain. "Just stop. You made your choice. You chose this company, this office, these deals over our marriage, over me." "You're right." His admission surprised her. "I chose wrong. Every single time I chose wrong." When she turned to face him, Nathan was closer than she had expected, close enough to see the regret etched in every line of his face. "I was arrogant," he continued. "I thought I could have everything, build an empire and keep the woman I loved. I thought you'd always be there waiting while I conquered the business world." "I waited for 3 years, Nathan. 3 years of canceled dinners, forgotten anniversaries, and promises you never kept." The old hurt poured out of her. "Do you know what it's like to compete with a company for your husband's attention and lose every single time? I know what it's like to realize you've thrown away the only thing that ever really mattered." Nathan's voice broke slightly. "I know what it's like to achieve everything you thought you wanted and discover it means nothing without someone to share it with." Miriam felt tears threaten and turned back to the window. "It's too late for regrets." "Is it?" Nathan moved beside her, careful not to touch but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "What if I told you I've spent the last 5 years trying to become the man you deserved? What if I told you I don't care?" But even as she said it, Miriam knew it was a lie. They stood in silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. The same view they'd admired on the night Nathan first brought her to this office, when Miller Industries was just a dream and their future seemed limitless. "There's something you need to see," Nathan said quietly. "Something I should have shown you years ago." He moved to a locked filing cabinet and withdrew a thick folder. When he handed it to Miriam, she saw it was labeled Second Chances Foundation. "What is this?" she asked, opening the file. "Every family affected by a corporate bankruptcy I helped cause," Nathan said, his voice barely audible. "I've been quietly providing assistance. College funds for kids whose parents lost jobs, medical expenses for families who lost health care, small business loans for people trying to rebuild." Miriam stared at the documents in shock. Hundreds of families, millions of dollars in assistance, all done anonymously, without publicity or tax benefits. "Nathan," she breathed. "It started right after our divorce," he admitted. "I realized that my pursuit of success had real consequences for real people. I couldn't undo the damage, but I could try to help them rebuild." Her hands shook as she read through case after case of quiet generosity. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because it doesn't excuse what I did to you." To us. Nathan's honesty was brutal and beautiful. "I can help strangers rebuild their lives, but I destroyed the most important relationship I ever had. Some mistakes can't be fixed with money." Miriam felt something crack inside her chest. This wasn't the selfish, ambition-driven man she'd divorced. This was someone who'd learned the cost of his choices and tried to make amends the only way he knew how. "You've been doing this for 5 years, she whispered. 5 years, 2 months and 16 days, Nathan said, since the day our divorce was finalized. The precise timing broke something loose in Miriam's heart. She'd thought him incapable of change, but here was proof that losing her had transformed him in ways she'd never imagined. "Miriam," Nathan's voice was gentle. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you beyond repair. But if there's any chance, any possibility that the woman I fell in love with is still somewhere inside the brilliant attorney standing here, I want you to know I never stopped loving you." She looked up from the files to find Nathan watching her with naked vulnerability. Gone was the confident CEO who commanded boardrooms. In his place stood the man she'd married, the one who used to trace patterns on her skin while sharing his dreams for the future. "I built this empire because I thought success would make me worthy of you," he continued. "Then I lost you while chasing worthiness I already had. You loved me when I had nothing, Miriam. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and I threw it away for something that never mattered." Tears she'd held back for 5 years finally spilled over. "Nathan, You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide about the company, whatever recommendation you make, I need you to know that losing you taught me what actually matters." The vulnerability in his voice, the evidence of his transformation, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, it all crashed over Miriam like a wave. Before she could think or reason or protect herself, she was in his arms. The kiss happened like lightning, sudden and inevitable. 5 years of pain and longing collided in that moment, and Miriam felt herself drowning in the familiar taste of him. Nathan's hands tangled in her hair as if she might disappear again, and she pressed closer, desperate to confirm this was real. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Miriam," Nathan whispered against her forehead. Reality crashed back like cold water. "I can't. We can't. This is exactly what I was afraid of." She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. "Nathan, I have to be objective. I have to think about what's best for the creditors, for your employees. I can't let personal feelings compromise my professional judgment. What if personal feelings are the only thing that can save this company?" Nathan asked. "What if the only person who understands my vision well enough to restructure it properly is the woman who helped me create it?" "That's not fair," Miriam protested. "You can't put that responsibility on me." "I'm not putting anything on you," Nathan said. "I'm asking you to consider that maybe we found our way back to each other for a reason. Maybe this isn't coincidence. Maybe it's a second chance." Before Miriam could respond, the sound of Richard Donovan's voice echoed from the outer office. "Nathan?" Your light's still on. Are you working this late? Miriam quickly moved to the other side of the room, busying herself with documents, while Nathan went to intercept his business partner. But the taste of him lingered on her lips and the warmth of his touch still tingled along her skin. She was in serious trouble. The next morning brought Clara Garcia. Miriam arrived at Nathan's office to find the rival attorney already seated at the conference table, perfectly coiffed and radiating professional predator energy. "Attorney Davis," Clara smiled with shark-like precision, "I understand you're handling the Miller Industries assessment." "That's correct," Miriam replied coolly, though warning bells chimed in her head. "I wanted to personally introduce myself," Clara continued, "in case you find the emotional complexity of this case too challenging. Given your personal history with Mr. Miller." The threat was delivered with poisonous sweetness. Miriam felt her spine stiffen with defensive anger. "My personal history gives me unique insight into Miller Industries' operational structure," Miriam replied. "I'm quite capable of maintaining professional objectivity." "Of course," Clara agreed, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Though I imagine the creditors would be concerned about any potential conflicts of interest, especially given that you stand to benefit significantly if the company avoids bankruptcy." "I stand to benefit from doing my job well, regardless of the outcome," Miriam said firmly. Clara's smile sharpened. "Naturally. I just wanted you to know that if the emotional burden becomes too much, I'm available to step in. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for former loved ones is let someone else handle their professional destruction." After Clara left, Miriam sat alone in Nathan's office, her hands shaking with fury and fear. The other attorney had made her position clear. One hint of bias, one suggestion of impropriety, and Clara would swoop in to claim the case and Nathan's company. When Nathan appeared an hour later, with lunch, he immediately sensed her distress. "What happened?" he asked, setting down the food and moving to her side. "Clara Garcia happened," Miriam said. "She's circling like a vulture, waiting for any excuse to take over this case." Nathan's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" "That my personal involvement makes me unsuitable to handle your restructuring objectively." Miriam stood, pacing to the window. "She's not wrong, Nathan. Last night proved that." "Last night proved that we still care about each other," Nathan said. "That doesn't make you incompetent. It makes me compromised." Miriam turned to face him. "If anyone discovers our history, if they find out about last night, I could lose my law license. And you could lose your company to someone who doesn't understand what you built or care about saving it." Nathan stepped closer, his expression intense. "Then we make sure no one finds out." "That's not the point." Miriam's voice rose with frustration. "The point is that I can't trust my own judgment around you. I can't think clearly when you're looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm the answer to every prayer you've ever made," she whispered. Nathan closed the distance between them in 2 strides. "Because you are." This time when he kissed her, Miriam didn't pull away. She melted into him, 5 years of loneliness and longing pouring out in desperate touches. Nathan lifted her onto his desk, documents scattering as she wrapped her legs around his waist. "We can't," she gasped against his neck. "I know," he murmured, but his hands were already skimming up her thighs. "This is insane. Completely. If anyone finds out." "They won't." Nathan's mouth found the sensitive spot below her ear, and Miriam's protest dissolved into soft sounds of pleasure. This was madness, professional suicide, the stupidest thing she'd ever done. But God, she'd missed this, missed him, missed the way he touched her like she was made of starlight and dreams. A sharp knock on the door sent them springing apart. "Mr. Miller?" His assistant's voice carried through the wood. "Your 2 o'clock appointment is here." Nathan called out that he'd be right there, but his eyes never left Miriam's face. She was breathing hard, her hair mussed, her lips swollen from his kisses. "This can't happen again," she said, smoothing her clothes with shaking hands. "Miriam." I mean it, Nathan. I won't destroy my career for a few moments of nostalgia. Is that what this is? Nathan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Nostalgia. She couldn't answer, couldn't admit that kissing him felt like coming home after years of wandering in the wilderness. As Nathan left for his meeting, Miriam slumped into his chair, her professional composure in ruins. She had 60 hours left to complete her assessment and make a recommendation that would affect hundreds of lives. 60 hours to save Nathan's company without losing her own soul in the process. And she was already failing at both. Chapter 3. By the second evening, Miriam had crafted a restructuring plan that could save Miller Industries. The solution was elegant in its simplicity: strategic divestments, executive salary cuts, and a phased approach to debt reduction that would preserve jobs while satisfying creditors. The only problem was telling Nathan that it required him to give up controlling interest in the company he'd built from nothing. She found him in his private apartment above the office, a space she'd never seen during their marriage. The penthouse was stark and beautiful, all clean lines and expensive emptiness. No personal touches, no warmth, nothing that suggested a life being lived rather than endured. Miriam. Nathan looked up from the whiskey he'd been nursing, surprise and pleasure warring in his expression. I thought you'd gone home. I finished the analysis, she said, holding up the folder that contained his company's salvation and her professional destruction. We need to talk. Nathan gestured to the leather sofa facing floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city lights. As Miriam sat, she noticed the apartment's sterile perfection was broken by one jarring element: a photo on the side table showing her and Nathan on their wedding day, laughing as they fed each other cake. He caught her staring. I know it's pathetic, but it's the only picture where I look truly happy. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. Nathan, about the restructuring plan. Tell me, he said, sitting beside her but careful to maintain distance. Miriam opened the folder, her legal training helping her maintain composure even as her heart hammered. The good news is that Miller Industries can be saved. The bad news is that it requires significant sacrifices. She walked him through the details: selling the European operations, cutting executive compensation by 70%, bringing in outside management to oversee the restructuring process. Bottom line, she concluded, you'll retain a minority stake in a smaller but financially stable company. Your employees keep their jobs, creditors get paid, and you get to watch someone else run the business you built. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. So, I save Miller Industries by losing control of it. Yes. And what happens to the woman I love? Does she disappear again once the paperwork is signed? The question hit Miriam like a physical blow. Nathan, we can't what? He turned to face her fully. Can't acknowledge that working together feels like the missing piece of my life sliding back into place? Can't admit that seeing you again made me realize I've been sleepwalking for 5 years? Can't jeopardize everything we've both built for a relationship that already failed once, Miriam finished desperately. Nathan stood, moving to the window with his whiskey. What if it didn't fail? What if we just weren't ready for it the first time? We were married for 4 years, Nathan. If we weren't ready then, what makes you think we're ready now? Because I've learned the difference between building something and building something that matters, he said without turning around. Because losing you taught me that success without love is just expensive loneliness. Miriam felt tears threatening. And what if I've learned that loving you means losing myself? What if I can't risk that again? Nathan set down his glass and faced her. Then I'll spend however long it takes proving that loving me means finding the best version of yourself. Because that's what you did for me, Miriam. You made me believe I was capable of greatness. You were always capable of greatness. But I needed you to see it first. Nathan moved closer, his voice dropping to the intimate tone she remembered from their early days. Do you know what I've missed most these past 5 years? Miriam shook her head, not trusting her voice. Not the physical intimacy, though God knows I've missed that too. Not the companionship or the partnership, though those nearly killed me to lose. Nathan knelt beside the sofa, bringing himself to her eye level. I've missed the way you looked at me when I came home from a difficult day, like I was your safe harbor in any storm. Nathan, please don't. I've missed making you laugh. I've missed the way you'd steal my coffee even though you claimed to prefer tea. I've missed falling asleep with you in my arms and knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, we'd face them together. Each word was a key, turning in locks around Miriam's heart that she'd spent 5 years securing. Those things weren't enough to save us before. Because I didn't fight for them, Nathan said simply. I took them for granted. I took you for granted. I thought Miller Industries needed me more than you did. It did need you. This is proof of that. Miriam gestured to the restructuring documents. Miller Industries needed a CEO. You needed a husband. I failed to understand the difference. Nathan's hand hovered near her face, not quite touching. If you give me another chance, I promise I'll never confuse the two again. The vulnerability in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was his entire world. It was everything she'd dreamed of during their marriage and everything she'd convinced herself was impossible. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of believing you've changed and discovering I was wrong. Of falling in love with you again and losing myself in the process. Of choosing my heart over my head and having it destroy both our careers. Nathan finally touched her, his fingertips tracing the line of her jaw with reverent gentleness. I'm scared too. I'm terrified that I've missed my only chance with the love of my life. I'm afraid that 5 years was too long, that I hurt you too badly, that you've moved on in ways that don't include me. I never moved on, Miriam admitted, the words pulled from the depths of her soul. I dated other men, but I never stopped comparing them to you. I built a successful career, but I never stopped wishing you were there to celebrate my victories with me. Miriam. Her name was a prayer on his lips. I kept your letters, she continued, the confessions pouring out now. Every single love letter you wrote me during our engagement and marriage. I was supposed to throw them away when we divorced, but I couldn't. They're in a box in my closet, and sometimes, when I'm feeling especially lonely, I read them and remember what it felt like to be loved completely. Nathan's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You are loved completely. You never stopped being loved completely. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their desperate encounters in his office. This was tender and sure, a homecoming after years in exile. Miriam felt herself melting into him, 5 years of careful walls crumbling under the weight of longing and love. Nathan, she breathed against his lips. Tell me what you need, he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. I need to know this is real, she whispered. I need to know you won't disappear into work the moment things get difficult. I need you to know that you're my priority now, Nathan replied, his hands framing her face. Not the company, not the empire, not any of it. You. Just you. The sincerity in his voice broke through her last defenses. When she kissed him again, it was with complete surrender, her body and heart remembering what it felt like to trust him completely. Nathan lifted her into his arms, carrying her to his bedroom with careful reverence. The space was as sparse as the rest of the apartment, but softened by candlelight that flickered from surfaces around the room. You planned this, Miriam observed, noting the romantic atmosphere. I hoped, Nathan admitted, setting her down gently. I've hoped for 5 years that somehow, some way, you'd find your way back to me. He reached for the zipper of her dress, then paused. Are you sure? Instead of answering with words, Miriam reached up to unbutton his shirt, her fingers reacquainting themselves with the warmth of his skin. Nathan's sharp intake of breath told her he felt the same electric recognition. I've dreamed about this, he confessed, as her dress pooled at her feet. Every night for 5 years, I've dreamed about holding you again. Just holding? Miriam asked with a smile that held echoes of the playful woman she'd been during their marriage. Among other things, Nathan replied, his voice rough with desire and emotion. Their lovemaking was a conversation in a language only they remembered. Gentle touches that spoke of forgiveness, desperate kisses that conveyed years of longing, whispered endearments that rebuilt bridges burned by pride and misunderstanding. When Nathan's hands mapped the familiar landscape of her body, Miriam felt walls she'd built around her heart dissolving. When she traced patterns on his chest, she felt him tremble with something deeper than desire. I love you, Nathan whispered against her throat. I never stopped loving you, even when I was too stupid to show it properly. I love you too, Miriam replied, the admission both terrifying and liberating. God help me, I never stopped either. Their union was complete surrender, 5 years of separation disappearing in the sacred space between heartbeats. Nathan worshipped her with touches that spoke of reverence and regret, while Miriam gave herself to him with trust she'd thought permanently broken. Afterwards, they lay entwined in the soft glow of candlelight, neither wanting to break the spell with words. What happens now? Miriam finally asked, her head on Nathan's chest where she could hear his heartbeat. Now we figure out how to build something better than what we had before, Nathan replied, his fingers stroking through her hair, something that can survive the pressures that destroyed us the first time. And if we can't? If this is just nostalgia and physical chemistry? Nathan tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. Then at least we'll know we tried. But Miriam, what I feel for you isn't nostalgia. It's the foundation of everything good I've ever built or dreamed of building. The next morning brought reality crashing back with the force of a tidal wave. Miriam woke in Nathan's arms to the sound of her phone ringing incessantly. Jeremy's name flashed on the screen, and she knew her brother's protective instincts had detected trouble. I have to take this, she murmured, kissing Nathan's shoulder before slipping from the bed. Miriam, where the hell are you? Jeremy's voice was tight with concern. Simone said you never came home last night. I'm fine, Jeremy. I was working late and decided to stay at a hotel rather than drive home exhausted. Bullshit. Her brother knew her too well. You're with him, aren't you? Please tell me you didn't sleep with Nathan Miller. The accusation hit like cold water. Jeremy. Damn it, Miriam. Do you have any idea what you've done? Clara Garcia called me an hour ago. She's filing a complaint with the ethics board about your conflict of interest. If they investigate and find out you're sleeping with your client, you could be disbarred. Miriam felt the world tilt on its axis. She can't prove anything. She doesn't have to prove it. She just has to create enough doubt to get you removed from the case. Then she sweeps in as the replacement attorney and liquidates Miller Industries for maximum creditor recovery. Nathan had woken during the conversation, and Miriam saw her panic reflected in his eyes. I have to go, she told Jeremy, ending the call. Claire's making her move, Nathan said. It wasn't a question. Miriam nodded, already reaching for her clothes. She's filing an ethics complaint. Jeremy thinks she's trying to get me removed so she can take over the case. And liquidate the company, Nathan finished grimly. As Miriam dressed, her mind raced through scenarios and consequences. If the ethics board launches an investigation, they'll subpoena security footage, interview hotel staff, dig into every interaction we've had. Last night was the best thing that's happened to me in 5 years, Nathan interrupted. I won't let you regret it. I don't regret it, Miriam said, turning to face him, but I can't lose my career over it either. And I can't let Clara destroy your company because I couldn't maintain professional boundaries. Nathan stood, moving to her with characteristic determination. Then we fight. Together. How? How do we fight when the very thing worth fighting for is what's destroying us? Before Nathan could answer, his phone buzzed with an urgent text from Richard. Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Garcia's here with the creditors. She's moving fast, Nathan observed. Miriam felt panic rising in her chest. Nathan, I think I have to recuse myself from the case. It's the only way to protect both of us. If you recuse yourself, Clara takes over. If Clara takes over, she'll liquidate Miller Industries for maximum creditor recovery regardless of the human cost. But if I stay and they prove bias, I lose my license and you still lose the company. Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against the storm brewing around them. What if we find a third option? What third option? I don't know yet, Nathan admitted, but I know that losing you again isn't acceptable. And I know that letting Clara destroy 43 families' livelihoods isn't acceptable either. So we find another way. Miriam wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love could conquer the impossible odds stacked against them. But as she looked into Nathan's determined eyes, she saw the same stubborn optimism that had built Miller Industries from nothing. Maybe, just maybe, it was enough to save them both. An hour later, Miriam sat in Miller Industries' main conference room, watching Clara Garcia systematically dismantle her professional reputation. The conflict of interest is obvious, Clara was saying to the assembled creditors and board members. Attorney Davis was married to Mr. Miller. She has personal financial motivations that compromise her ability to provide objective counsel. My divorce settlement included no stake in Miller Industries, Miriam replied coolly. I have no financial interest in the company's survival or failure. Perhaps not officially, Clara conceded with a predatory smile, but surely you have emotional investments that affect your judgment. Tell me, Attorney Davis, when was the last time you spoke with Mr. Miller outside of this professional context? The question was a trap, and Miriam knew it. Any answer would either be a lie or an admission of impropriety. The nature and timing of my communications with Mr. Miller are privileged under attorney-client confidentiality, Miriam replied. Of course, Clara said smoothly, though I imagine the ethics board will find ways around such technicalities if they launch a formal investigation. Margaret Steinberg leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting we request a different attorney, Miss Garcia? I'm suggesting you deserve representation that puts creditor interests above personal feelings, Clara replied. I've prepared alternative restructuring recommendations that prioritize maximum asset recovery over sentimental concerns about job preservation. Miriam felt ice form in her veins. Clara's plan would gut Miller Industries and leave hundreds unemployed, but it would indeed maximize short-term creditor returns. May I see your alternative recommendations? Miriam asked. Clara slid a folder across the table with obvious satisfaction. As Miriam reviewed the contents, her heart sank. The plan was legally sound, financially aggressive, and completely heartless. It would strip Miller Industries down to its most valuable assets and sell everything else. This plan eliminates over 60% of current positions, Miriam observed. Unnecessary positions, Clara corrected. Mr. Miller's sentimental attachment to employees has contributed to the company's financial difficulties. Sometimes tough decisions require removing emotional considerations. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Speaking in his own defense would only support Clara's argument about emotional bias. Attorney Davis, Margaret Steinberg said, in light of these concerns about objectivity, perhaps you'd like to reconsider your involvement in this case. It was the moment Miriam had dreaded. She could step aside and watch Clara destroy Nathan's life's work, or she could fight and risk destroying her own career. Looking at Nathan across the conference table, seeing the quiet dignity with which he faced potential ruin, Miriam made her choice. No, she said firmly. I will not recuse myself. My restructuring plan serves both creditor interests and employment preservation. Ms. Garcia's plan prioritizes short-term gains over sustainable recovery. The choice is yours, but I stand behind my professional assessment. Clara's eyes glittered with triumph. Then I suppose we'll let the ethics board determine your fitness to continue. As the meeting dissolved into procedural discussions about formal complaints and investigations, Miriam felt Nathan's hand briefly touch hers under the table. The simple contact conveyed everything words couldn't: gratitude, love, and shared determination to fight for what they'd found together. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners, just like they should have done the first time. Chapter 4. The ethics board hearing was scheduled for the following morning, giving Clara Garcia exactly the timeline she needed to destroy both Miriam's career and Nathan's company. But as Miriam worked through the night preparing her defense, she discovered something that changed everything. In the depths of Miller Industries' corporate filings, buried beneath layers of subsidiary paperwork, she found a series of payments that didn't match any legitimate business expense. Payments made to a shell company owned by Clara Garcia. "Nathan," she called, her voice tight with excitement and anger. "You need to see this." Nathan looked up from his own laptop, where he'd been reviewing personnel files, trying to find a way to save as many jobs as possible, regardless of the outcome. "Clara's been taking money from your competitors," Miriam said, showing him the financial trail she'd uncovered. Retainer fees for consulting services that correspond exactly with major bankruptcies she's handled. She's not just an attorney, Nathan. She's a corporate assassin for hire. Nathan studied the documents, his expression darkening. "She's been paid to destroy companies?" "And their people," Miriam confirmed. "Look at the pattern. Every company she's restructured has ended up liquidated within 6 months, regardless of their actual financial viability. She's been systematically destroying businesses for clients who benefit from their failure." "Do we have enough to prove this?" Miriam's smile was sharp with vindication. "We have enough to bury her. The question is whether we can do it before she buries us." The ethics board hearing convened at 9 a.m. in a sterile conference room that felt more like a courtroom. Clara sat with predatory confidence, while Miriam faced a panel of 3 senior attorneys who would determine her professional fate. "Attorney Davis," the lead investigator began, "you've been accused of maintaining an inappropriate personal relationship with your client that compromises your professional judgment. How do you respond?" "I deny any impropriety," Miriam replied steadily. "However, I have discovered evidence of actual ethical violations that this board should address immediately." Clara's composure slipped slightly. This is clearly a desperate attempt to deflect from Attorney Davis's obvious conflicts of interest. "Let her speak," the lead investigator said. Miriam presented her evidence methodically, watching Clara's face grow paler with each revelation. The shell company payments, the pattern of unnecessary liquidations, the coordination with competitors who benefited from destroyed businesses. These documents suggest that Attorney Garcia has been systematically corrupting bankruptcy proceedings for personal profit, Miriam concluded. Her attack on my involvement in the Miller Industries case appears to be motivated by her commitment to a client who profits from the company's destruction. The room erupted. Clara's protests about authentication and relevance were drowned out by the investigator's urgent questions. Within an hour, Clara Garcia was facing her own ethics investigation while Miriam walked free. But the party's victory felt hollow when Miriam returned to Miller Industries to find Nathan in his office, staring out at the city he'd helped build. "It's over," he said without turning around. "Even with Clara out of the picture, the creditors want immediate action. They're not willing to wait for a restructuring plan that might fail." "What are you saying?" Nathan faced her, and Miriam saw defeat in his eyes. "I'm saying I'm liquidating Miller Industries voluntarily. If I do it myself, I can at least ensure severance packages for the employees and some protection for the pension fund. Nathan, no. The restructuring plan can work. We just need more time. We don't have more time, Miriam. And I won't let our relationship cost 43 families their livelihoods because I was too stubborn to accept reality. The sacrifice in his voice broke her heart. This was the man she'd fallen in love with twice, someone willing to lose everything to protect others. There has to be another way, she insisted. There is. Nathan moved to his desk and withdrew a thick legal document. Thomas Blackstone contacted me this morning. He's been quietly organizing a consortium of investors who want to acquire Miller Industries' green energy assets. They're offering enough to satisfy the creditors and fund a smaller, more focused company. Miriam scanned the document, hope rising in her chest. Nathan, this could work. You could retain operational control, keep most of your employees, and I wouldn't retain control, Nathan interrupted gently. Thomas would serve as CEO while I transitioned to a consulting role. It's the only way the investors will agree to the deal. The implications hit Miriam like a physical blow. You'd give up everything you built. I'd give up control of something I built to save the people who helped me build it, Nathan corrected, and to protect the woman I love from any more professional damage. Nathan, I can't let you sacrifice your life's work for me. You're not letting me do anything, Nathan said, moving to cup her face in his hands. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing to be the man you deserved the first time around. What would you choose? Protecting your career or fighting for true love? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for tomorrow's conclusion. The board meeting that afternoon was unlike any in Miller Industries history. Nathan presented Thomas Blackstone's offer with quiet dignity, explaining how the acquisition would preserve jobs while satisfying creditor obligations. It's a generous offer, Margaret Steinberg admitted, but it essentially means you're walking away from the company you built. I'm ensuring the company survives in a form that honors its original mission, Nathan replied. Sometimes the best thing a leader can do is step aside for the greater good. The vote was unanimous. Miller Industries would be acquired by Blackstone Ventures, with Nathan transitioning to an advisory role and most employees retaining their positions. As the creditors and board members filed out, satisfied with the outcome, Nathan found himself alone with Miriam in the conference room where their reunion had begun. "Any regrets?" she asked softly. "Only one," Nathan replied. "I regret not fighting for us the first time. I regret choosing pride over love, work over marriage, empire over happiness. And now?" Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. "Now I'm choosing differently. I'm choosing you, Miriam. Every time, in every way that matters, I'm choosing you. Even if it means losing everything else. Especially then," Nathan said, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. "Because what I've learned in 5 years without you is that everything else is just noise without someone to share it with." When he kissed her, it was with the certainty of a man who'd finally discovered his true priorities. Miriam felt herself dissolving into him, letting go of fear and doubt and professional anxiety in favor of simple truth. She loved this man, and he loved her, and everything else was just details to be worked out. "Marry me," Nathan whispered against her lips. "We're already divorced," Miriam pointed out with a laugh that held tears. "Then marry me again. Marry me properly this time. Marry me with the understanding that you'll always come first before any company or deal or opportunity. Nathan, marry me with the promise that we'll face everything as partners, that success only counts if we achieve it together, that love is the foundation and everything else is just window dressing." Miriam looked into Nathan's eyes and saw not the driven CEO who'd lost her the first time, but the man she'd fallen in love with in a cramped apartment when his biggest dream was making enough money to take her to dinner somewhere with tablecloths. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you again. Yes, I'll be your partner in everything. Yes, I choose love over fear. The kiss that followed was interrupted by Thomas Blackstone, clearing his throat from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, the older man said with a knowing smile, but I wanted to discuss the transition timeline with you both. Both? Miriam asked, confused. Thomas's smile widened. Nathan, you didn't tell her? Tell me what? Miriam looked between the two men. Nathan had the grace to look sheepish. The investor consortium isn't just acquiring Miller Industries. They want to launch a new legal division focused on ethical corporate restructuring. They've asked me to recommend someone to head it. Understanding dawned on Miriam's face. You recommended me. I recommended the most brilliant bankruptcy attorney I know, Nathan confirmed. Someone who's proven she can balance creditor interests with human consequences. Someone who's shown she has the integrity to stand up for what's right, even when it costs her personally. It would mean leaving my current firm, Miriam said slowly. It would mean building something new together, Nathan replied. Something that reflects both our values and skills. Something that honors the partnership we should have had from the beginning. Miriam felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy rather than loss. So what do you say, counselor? Thomas asked. Ready to help us prove that business success and human decency aren't mutually exclusive. Together? Miriam asked Nathan. Always together, he confirmed. 6 months later, Miriam stood in the offices of Blackstone Miller Legal Services, watching Nathan present their latest case study to a room full of corporate attorneys. The new firm had already saved 3 companies from unnecessary liquidation while ensuring fair creditor recovery. More importantly, Nathan was home for dinner every night. How did the presentation go? She asked as they walked to their car. Perfectly, Nathan replied, pulling her close, though I think they were more impressed by the partner who designed the legal framework than the guy who implemented it. We make a good team, Miriam agreed. The best, Nathan said, then stopped walking suddenly. Miriam, there's something I need to ask you. She turned to find him on one knee in the parking garage, holding a simple diamond ring. We're already engaged, she laughed, though her eyes filled with tears. We're engaged because circumstances forced us to confront our feelings, Nathan said. I want to propose because I choose to spend every day for the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of your love. Nathan, you don't have to. Miriam Davis, he interrupted, his voice strong and sure. Will you marry me, not because we found our way back to each other, but because we choose to keep finding our way to each other every single day? Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I choose you every day. Yes, I choose us every day. Yes, I marry you every day in my heart. As Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, Miriam felt the last pieces of her heart heal completely. This wasn't the desperate reunion of 2 broken people trying to recapture the past. This was the deliberate choice of 2 whole people building a future together. I love you, Nathan said, standing to kiss her thoroughly. I love you too, Miriam replied. And this time, we're going to get it right. This time, Nathan agreed, we already have. The story could have ended there, with 2 people who'd learned that true success means building something meaningful with someone you love. But love stories don't really end, they just begin new chapters. And Miriam and Nathan had a lifetime of chapters yet to write. Have you ever had to choose between career success and true love? What would you do if given a second chance with someone who truly changed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining Nathan and Miriam's journey of rediscovered love and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of love, forgiveness, and transformation. Tomorrow, we'll explore another story of unexpected encounters and the courage to love again. You won't want to miss it. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. And tell me in the comments, do you believe people can truly change for love?